Hi, everyone. This is Samantha Oakley from ALA's Public Programs Office. Welcome to today's webinar, ALA's Sara Jaffarian Award presents Junior Ambassadors. Before we start, I'd like to make a few quick notes. Today's webinar is presented by ALA's Public Programs Office with funding provided by the National Endowment for the Humanities as part of the Coronavirus Relief and Economic Security CARES Act, Economic Stabilization Plan. Hopefully, many of you are familiar with Programming Librarian, a website of ALA's Public Programs Office. We have a lot of program ideas and an online learning library full of free webinars just like this one. A couple of notes about our virtual classroom. Only our presenters have microphone access, but you are welcome to type your questions or comments in the chat box. To send a chat message, move your cursor towards the bottom of the Zoom window and click Chat. Please note that the chat defaults to sending only to all panelists. To make sure everyone can see your message, be sure to select all panelists and attendees in the drop-down box next to the To field in the chat. If you have any technical issues, please use the Q&A window to communicate with ALA staff. To send a message through the Q&A feature, move your cursor towards the bottom of the Zoom window and click on Q&A. Please do not put technical questions in the chat window as they could get missed there. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to Chris.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Chris Young. As chair of the Sara Jaffarian School Library Program Award, I'm proud to introduce today's webinar about Batesville Intermediate School's Junior Ambassadors Initiative, the program series that won the 2020 Sara Jaffarian Award. This year, the Jaffarian Award Committee was unanimous in selecting Batesville Intermediate School's Junior Ambassadors Program, which demonstrated a strong connection between library programming and the school curriculum, as well as a commitment to understanding and sharing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The librarian, Anne Amrhein, cultivated strong collaborative partnerships with local businesses and nonprofit organizations to help students learn more about issues facing the wider world and empowered students to become educators and change agents in their community. Local media coverage of student fundraisers for communities in Haiti and Kenya speak to the impact these students made as a result of their involvement in the Junior Ambassadors Book Club. Now I'd like to introduce our presenter for this afternoon, Anne Amrhein. Anne worked at Batesville Community School Corporation for 23 years as an elementary classroom teacher, and then for 13 years as a media and instructional technology specialist. She holds bachelor's and master's degrees in elementary education from Indiana University, Bloomington, and a library certification from Indiana State University. She's the longtime coordinator of the Arts and Education Program, is in her 4th term as a member of the Batesville Memorial Public Library's Board of Trustees, and sits on the board of directors of the Joan and John Hillenbrand Vision Fund for Innovation. Upon her retirement at the end of the 2019-2020 school year, Batesville Intermediate School established the Anne Amrhein Love of Learning Award to be given annually to an outgoing 5th grader. And with that, I'm pleased to turn the mic over to Anne.
Thank you, Chris, and welcome everyone. I'm happy to be here on behalf of Batesville Intermediate School, its library, and our junior ambassadors, and I'm excited to share our program with you. My goal today is to share what we did and what worked for us, to offer you suggestions for adaptations and resources in case you want to try something similar. So please feel free to ask questions as we go along, and we'll get to them at the end. The Junior Ambassadors Program at Batesville Intermediate has its foundations in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And in case you're unfamiliar with them, these are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, established in 2015. Now, to quote the UN website, the Sustainable Development Goals are a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and improve the lives and prospects of everyone everywhere. The UN has a target date of 2030 to meet these goals. Then, in May of 2019, the United Nations launched a book club for young people. Each month, the UN posts on their SDG book club website a selection of 3 to 5 books for children ages 6 through 12 that illustrate a particular sustainable development goal As of today, 11 of the 17 SDGs have book club recommendations. I do think that COVID kind of slowed them down a little bit. So the junior ambassadors studied the first 4 last year: no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, and quality education. And again, to quote the UN website, the UN encourages young people to read the books that they hope will inspire the children to help make the world a better place for everyone. And in fact, our junior ambassadors did just that. So the program itself was launched in August of 2019 using the UN's SDG Book Club as a springboard to introduce students to a more global perspective of our world's big issues. So there were 24 high ability 4th and 5th graders met for 30 minutes, 4 days a week, to read and discuss, research, learn, plan, and execute the sharing of knowledge and solutions to these very real, very large issues. And here they are. They look just like normal kids, don't they? But they were something. That's me on the back in the far right. And co-teacher Angie Moster is on the far left in black. And we talked together the entire time. So a little demographic information about us. Batesville is a small town of approximately 6,500 people. We're on Interstate 74, halfway between Cincinnati and Indianapolis, in those rolling hills of southeastern Indiana. Our public school system has about 2,200 students in grades K through 12. There's one of each building. And the intermediate school houses about 480 students in grades 3, 4, and 5. Now, our schools have always had good working relationships with our community. Active collaboration between Batesville schools and the community is the norm as opposed to the exception. And we are most fortunate in that way. But both sides work diligently and with commitment to make it so. Now, one of those businesses, Hillenbrand, a globally diversified company headquartered here in Batesville, was in the process of signing the Global Compact with the UN. And they actually reached out to us. So the Global Compact is the business portion. It's when the compact is something that the business would sign on and promise to do to help support their sustainable development goals through their business practices. So Hillenbrand executive Tori Flynn, she reached out to our principal, Dana Cassidy, back in May of 2019 and asked if our school was interested in partnering with them to initiate a program with this newly launched book club. Of course, Dana said yes. And there's Dana there on next slide, please. Dana on the left had been looking for something for our high ability students. In that 2019-20 school year, we were going to go with a school-wide RTI time. And for those of you not in education, RTI stands for Response to Instruction. And it sets aside time to provide students with what they need, whether it's remediation or extension or just time to practice. So Dana asked Angie and I to lead this RTI group. And of course, we said yes. And then following a couple summertime meetings, brainstorming meetings with Dana and Angie, me, and Hillenbrand personnel, and $500 from Hillenbrand to get started with book club purchases, we were pretty much ready to start the year. So Dana is there on the left. She's our principal, is still the principal. And and Kelsey Weber's on the right from Hillenbrand. And this photo was taken at our press conference on October 21st. That's when we officially launched our partnership with Hillenbrand. So these are our goals that we set up for the program. So we have students will increase their knowledge of global issues such as poverty and hunger. They will increase and strengthen their leadership and collaboration skills. And then we also wanted to create a program that could be replicated and is sustainable. And then flexible, which it turned out it was. But I'll talk more about how COVID-19 affected us last spring and then again right now this fall. So we set up our goals, and then we have this. Then our basic framework was actually to for our students to increase their knowledge and awareness of the first 4 Sustainable Development Goals through those United Nations SDG Book Club selections, also with research and guest speakers and projects. We studied 1 goal per quarter. How we set that up. And then we also wanted our students to share this knowledge with BI students through book club and school-wide projects, so that all students in grades 3 through 5 became aware of the United Nations SDGs. So both the goals and the framework ended up working really well. They helped guide us as things went along, including during that COVID-19 pandemic climate. So, and actually, I feel like as long as you're able to share those book club books with your group, you can accomplish most of what I'm going to share today, either in person, virtually, or in a hybrid format. Of course, the in-person is by far the best, but it does work. There's a lot of options for this. So know that we made our decisions based on what our needs were. So as you listen, and if you're like me, you're trying to fit a program like this to your own situation, know that there are lots of options that will work. For example, we chose 24 kids to be in that program that first year, and we chose 24 because it was a manageable number. We wanted the program, and because we wanted the program to succeed. As a former classroom teacher, 24 is my perfect number. There's enough diversity of personality and strengths, gender, even in a homogeneous group, and it divides well. Plus, we had 6 tables of 4 in our instructional area in the library. So, and we chose high ability because that's the group we needed something for. But those 2 factors, while they contributed to our success, they're not required for success with a program like this. So thank you, baby. I'm sorry about that agenda. So today I'm going to just talk about how we used those books and the research and the guest speakers to study the SDG. Talk about kids, the groups, the junior ambassadors teaching their peers. Our big project was a grain of rice project, Readathon. There were a lot of additional learning opportunities, and I'll share a few of those, as well as my take on the keys to the success of this program. Then we'll have time for questions and answers. All right, so the book club. Here are the selections for the SDG number 1, No Poverty. Serafina's Promise, it's a novel written in verse, and the other 2 are picture books, Last Stop on Market Street and A Chair for My Mother. The UN has quite a few resources on their website and on their YouTube channel, and everything's available in 6 languages. I have resource links on the last slide as well. So the books. So this is what we did. We used the books to launch the topics, and we would use the main book with the junior ambassadors. And by main book, I mean, there was usually one content heavy book. I think the UN had that geared to the older end of the age range that the club is geared or is targeting. And so we usually use that book as our main one to read and discuss with an eye to how the book illustrates the topic. We really delved into that one, and that's what the junior ambassadors read. Then we did read the rest of the books that were recommended. Now, I will say in this first one, there is a 4th book, but we were unable to secure it in time, so we didn't use it, but it's available. And then after we read all the books that were part of that SDG, we brainstormed ideas for ways to educate others and take part in solutions. So what we did is to purchase the book, we purchased the book with an eye to sustainability and how we would use them. So in general, now I would buy 1 of each copy, and then we would take a look at those, and Angie and I would both read all the books and decide how many copies we thought we needed for this year, and then how they might be used going forward. So this first one, I knew all the books, so that made that easy. So we also looked at price and all that kind of stuff. we like to buy 30 copies of a content-heavy book. So in this first one, that was Seraphina's Promise. That gave enough for each of our junior ambassadors to read, one for Angie, one for me. If a couple teachers or other kids heard about it, wanted to read it, that was great. But it also gave us enough copies going forward, so there would be a lot of flexibility with who was using those books, whether it was junior ambassadors or a classroom teacher or any other group that would like to use them. And then we would buy between either 8 or 13 copies of picture books. And those numbers are also specific to us. If I picked 8 copies, it's because our building has 7 classrooms in each grade level. And so if a grade level wanted to use those books, there would be 1 for each class plus an extra. The 13 books that number was chosen because when our junior ambassadors went in to teach, they taught in pairs. So 24 kids, 12, that was 12 pairs and an extra one. As far as funding, the books were the only cost in the program. And I just want to say, when sometimes you look and you think, oh, that sounds great, but how are we going to be able to afford this? That books are expensive. We all know that, don't we? But here's the thing. You might find it much easier to secure funding for something like this than you might think. Companies in our area are always looking for partnership opportunities. Talk it up, put the word out there. You might find that that the funding piece of it is not as hard as you might think. So our 3 funding sources were Hillenbrand. So they gave us $500 to start, and then later in the year they gave us another $2,000 with a sustainability grant. We used high ability grant funds. So depending on your group, you might find funding in your own organization, right in your own organization, maybe title money or special education money or grade level money. Again, if you let people know what you're doing, sometimes that the money's there. So for example, both Hillenbrand and high ability grant funds, that they both came to us. I didn't have to do anything. Hillenbrand contacted us in the beginning, and then the high ability grant funds actually, the director who was in charge of those funds was at the school board meeting when our superintendent, Paul Ketchum, and our principal, Dana Cassidy, was talking about the program following that Hillenbrand launch. And she called the next day and said, hey, we've got some money left. Can you use it? So anyway, you might find funding right there. And then I also use the library's book fair account. I use it to fill in gaps or take advantage of sales. For example, I found Malala on firstbook.org and was able to purchase it before they were all gone. So that was nice. The other thing is, by limiting our first year to this first 4 goals, that helped make the funding easier because we didn't need all the money up front. In fact, not all the SDGs are even announced. So you don't need all the money up front. And so that really helps. That gave us a lot of some wiggle room with funding with the books. And it took us a little while also to figure out how many books we wanted to have and how we thought they might be used going forward. So the plan is, though, for this program, for the junior ambassadors, the plan is that each succeeding year, students will review previously studied SDGs and add new ones. So by the end of their 3 years at Batesville Intermediate School, all students will be familiar with all 17 SDGs. Here's a sample of lesson plans. As you can see, we kept it very simple. It's actually really just a record of what we did. And I do want to say this program was very little effort. I worked a lot harder on my weekly library lesson plans than I did on the junior ambassadors. In fact, the most time-consuming part was ordering and processing the books and keeping track of them. And that's something most of you are familiar with. All right, so book club. I know I'm probably kind of preaching to the choir on that one. So here's some pictures of these are some of our junior ambassadors reading Seraphina's Promise. Here's an example of a Canvas page, and we did teaching as we go. We taught skills as they were needed, and we could always come back to those. It was really nice. We also taught little things like here's the mint water. Angie Moster, my co-teacher, she served mint water while we were reading Seraphina's Promise. That was Seraphina's Promise takes place in Haiti, and that was played a role in part of the story. And then we did little things teaching as we go, even little things like herbs. Here, Rohan is learning that touching an herb releases its scent. So that was fun. So that was the book club part of it. And then what we did was then we did some research. And Canvas is our corporation's learning management system. It's this LMS, it's comparable to Google Classroom, if you're not familiar with Canvas. And Canvas, what it did is it provided a place for us to house information and videos and links. We could send messages and I could send out announcements, things like that. So I created a Junior Ambassadors course, and then we added things to the course that all of us used, but I also put in things that I wanted students who wanted to learn more and delve deeper. I put links to articles and videos and things like that, so they could learn more if they wanted to. And keeping something like this in Canvas, it was a lifesaver when COVID hit and we were all at home. So the next thing is guest speakers. They were an excellent addition to the program. The guest speakers were wonderful. They gave our students additional perspectives of activism and commitment towards solving a problem such as hunger and poverty. The groups, they shared ways their groups would meet immediate needs as well as create sustainable solutions to long-term problems. For example, they showed that we had a couple people who were part of Haiti Ministries and came and talked to our students about Haiti. And like a short-term solution would be medical help for their the people they would go to see. But a sustainable one is, I know the one St. Anthony Ministry, they paid for two Haitians to go, they sponsored them to go to school so that they could come back and teach, because having students go beyond sixth grade was impossible because there were no teachers. So that was an example of a long-term solution to a problem. Our students were so inspired. And all of our guests were friends or friends of friends, relatives, and we found it through networking and casual conversations. And you can do that too. So just talk about it. Here is Joe Rennekamp, and I will be forever grateful he was our first speaker, and he set the tone with such an informative and memorable talk. Our students quoted him verbatim for weeks and months after that. Here's Sarah Huber. She's Angie's niece, and she was from Gleaner's Food Bank of Indiana. And she really helped our students get a perspective of hunger and food security, or food insecurity, excuse me. So now we've read the books, we've had discussions, we've been brainstorming ideas, we did some research, we had guest speakers to get different perspectives on the SDG itself. And so our next steps were, we wanted our junior ambassadors to use this newfound knowledge and inspiration, and they worked in pairs to create and teach multimedia lessons to the rest of the 480 students in our grades 3 through 5 building. So the kids paired up, and then each pair was assigned 2 classrooms, and they led 25-minute lessons that included using one of the SDGs Books Club's recommended picture books. A lot of them used the slideshows as well. So here are some pictures of the students teaching in their classrooms. For many students, I think for many of the junior ambassadors, the teaching part of it was a favorite. Preparing the lessons and the teaching. I think they really love that. All right. So this is a sample calendar. Just gives you a broader picture of the first 3 months last year. You can see how long we would spend with the book club. I considered preparing for the teaching project work. So to recap, we introduced an SDG using the book club books. then extended the learning with research, guest speakers, and teaching their peers. And I did want to address COVID. It hit in March, and while we were unable to meet in person and complete a couple projects we had planned for our school and the local community, we did meet 3 times a week on Google Meet through the end of the school year. We continued reading. We read a Malala ebook, and a few teams finished up their classroom lessons virtually. So if I had known we were not coming back, I would have sent home every book with the kids, every book coming up that we had already purchased with them. But we didn't. We thought we were closing for a couple of weeks. And so we read an ebook that we found on Epic. It wasn't the exact Malala one, but it was fine. Went with gender equality. There were a few teams. The kids all taught 5 lessons during the course of the year, the 4 STGs, and they also did a readathon lesson. But there were a few kids that few teams didn't finish their classroom lessons. So they were able to do that virtually. And, we didn't get to do the local pantry project or the school-wide project that we were hoping to use some of our meditation and focus activities from good health and well-being and quality education. We were going to do some stuff right before standardized testing with wrapping up the school year, but it was fine. Having Canvas and Google Suite experience made it all really doable. Now this fall, the junior ambassadors are up and running. They have some adjustments due to COVID, but they're meeting in person before school. They're creating virtual classroom lessons. They have already studied the SDG, clean water and sanitation, which is perfect for this year. So so everything's going. It's different people running it. I'm home, but Mrs. Kaiser took over for me, and Mrs. Monster's doing something else, and she is actually so Mrs. Belts is there, but they're up and running, so which is great. All right, projects. Our big project was the Grain of Rice Readathon, and that ran from October 11th to November 7th, and our students ran everything from start to finish. Now, Grain of Rice Project is a nonprofit organization that is out of Kenya. But the founder, Amy Bakahiga, grew up about 30 minutes away. So she called me over the summer. This is another thing that just fell in my lap. She called me that summer before and said, I'm thinking about, we're going to try to build a school. We bought land, we're trying to build a school, and I'm going to run a readathon in Indiana. Are you interested? Of course, I said yes, thinking, that might be something the junior ambassadors could do. And if not, I can run it through the library. So the Readathon supported this initiative, and it was a lot of fun, and it turned out to be really successful. So as far as adaptations for this year, or for any of you who would like to try something with this program, a readathon can support any cause. I mean, you can, and it could also be one that is run virtually. Right. So, and the slide just shows some media posts. And so what we did is, it was a big project. It ran like 6 to 7 weeks. We had some subcommittees. So we got some ideas about what we thought kinds of committees we would need. The kids helped with that. We ended up with 6 because we had 6 tables of 4. Kids kind of shuffled according to what they wanted to do. And as you could see, these were the different areas. The logistics one, I didn't really know what to call that, but those are the kids that took the sample letters from Grain of Rice Project and adjusted them for what we were planning to do. The accounting group, they got to handle all the money, and boy, there was a lot of money to handle. It was kind of fun. Now, we kept everybody busy at all stages, though. So extra jobs for teams that finished tasks. So for example, graphic design posters, well, the posters had to be done right at the beginning. So they were then tasked with creating, they designed the t-shirts, those junior ambassador t-shirts that you saw the kids in the beginning. They designed those. The group that did the Grain of Rice classroom lesson, they created that lesson, but it had to be ready early. So what they did is then they were the ones that created a presentation for the launch with Hillenbrand on October 21st. So they explained what we were doing up to that point and what our plans were. And then they actually presented at that launch. And then the other thing is all the kids could work on Zero Hunger, the reading, and preparing for upcoming lessons. So really everyone was busy that whole time. All right, here's a slide of girls at the radio station. They were on Coffee with Kaufman. Jody Kaufman's our local radio station's news director. And then the next one is Amy Bakahiga came right towards the end of the readathon and spoke to any of the kids that participated. So that was about 80 to 100 kids. And then the readathon was a success. Of the $3,200 in the readathon, 1/3 of it came back to the intermediate school. And our junior ambassadors, they were so taken with Serafina's promise and our guest speakers' messages about Haiti that they chose to use those readathon profits to help children in Haiti. So they bought 340-ounce jars of peanut butter and 526 tubes of toothpaste, which was sent to Haiti in the winter of 2020. We went to Walmart and everything to pick it up. It was great. So that was our big project, and there were all kinds of things that go with that. And so now I'd like to talk a little bit about some additional learning opportunities. We really, as we went along, we really took advantage of a lot of learning opportunities and group dynamics, like those book club norms, discussion norms I showed you that slide earlier. Well, those actually, we use those pretty often because those fed really well into skills of an effective group work. The writing, it was probably the most real. We had real audiences, varying purposes with thank you notes and newspaper articles. That group of girls that wrote for the WRBI interview, well, we talked about before they went that, Mrs. Kaufman doesn't know anything about the readathon, much less the junior ambassadors. So you need to provide questions for her that guides the discussion so that you're able to share what you want to share about the upcoming readathon. Well, they had a great script, and they were all had good morning and the exact letters like good morning, and we have 4 special guests from Batesville Intermediate School for Ms. Kaufman to say. So it was just really cute, but just great writing and great opportunities for writing. Sorry. The tech skills. All of our students have laptops, and they were new last year. The first time we all had laptops. They all had Google accounts. So we use those Google Suite items like Docs and the spreadsheets and the slideshows. And we taught them how to share and how you set ownership settings and how you can really collaborate in real time with the Google items. The next page, we also teaching skills. When the kids taught, we talked about what makes a good lesson. We talked about timing and engagement. We talked about scaffolding. The second time you go in, you kind of review a little bit about what you did the first time and what you're planning to do. And they were throwing those words around like scaffolding and engagement. It was great. Presentation skills, how much goes on a slide, that kind of thing. Don't read it unless you're talking to students that can't read the slide. And that was the case sometimes. And then usage rights and copyright. Lots of great lessons for that. The logo for the t-shirt, that wheel from the UN, it was the usage page, it was a 17-page PDF on the ways you were allowed to use it and not allowed to use it. So that little team got all kinds of information. And then empathy. I put that in capital letters. I do view that as a skill that can be encouraged, if not taught. Empathy is different than sympathy or pity, but I think it's a powerful ability to be able to empathize with others. And we did work to try to encourage that. It was the best of teaching. Taught what the students needed when they needed to learn and when they needed it. It was great. It really was. So some keys to success. Now, some of the Mrs. Monster, you might be sitting in on this. And maybe the junior ambassadors, you might think you might have some other ideas, but I think these main ones were pretty important. A set time to meet several times a week. That RTI time, it was from 8:25 to 8:55, Monday through Thursday. It really helped having meetings, a consistency, moving forward. We didn't lose our momentum ever by having, so it really helped. And it helped with those teaching opportunities as well, because there was no conflict of time, which was great. The book club format was great. Serafina's Promise, that is a perfect launch book. It's chosen to eliminate no poverty, but it really demonstrated poverty and hunger and health and education, all four SDGs that we studied last year, and how they're interwoven in such a difficult cause and effect. And so if I had to recommend one book for you to choose, it would be Serafina's Promise. Open to opportunities. We didn't have any preconceived notions of how the program should go. And we gave the kids, we gave ownership and opportunities. So it really did unfold into something so much more. We just kind of relaxed and didn't try to make it into something. We didn't try to make it into something. We let it unfold. And that was much more successful that way. And then active participation. Active is the key word. Truly, these junior ambassadors, they started that first day as readers, and it wasn't long they were activists. They truly were. So we gave them as much ownership as we were able to. We let them make decisions, work through problems. We didn't tell them it was, that idea wouldn't work. We let them try to figure out why it wouldn't work. That it wasn't a bad idea, just didn't fit what we needed right now. And so this giving them ownership, especially at this age, the kids were 9, 10, maybe 11. And so I know older kids sometimes get that, but kids our age, I really think that we showed them how much we trusted and respected them. And then that's always rewarded, in my opinion. So making a difference, one goal at a time. I think that what set this program apart was the degree of engagement on the part of its members. I think the kids recognize that what they're learning and what they're doing is important. How they operate individually and collectively allows them to make a difference, even at their age. Students also recognize the different types of learning. For example, awareness of a problem and what it looks like locally and globally, and that there were tools and skills to master in order to make a difference effectively, and that cooperation with give and take was essential. I think we all learned, students and adults, that given an opportunity, each of us can make a difference and make the world a better place. The program, it turned out to be such a meaningful and joyful endeavor for me. It was the highlight of last year for me, and definitely, maybe even my career. I want to thank BIS Dana Cassidy for nominating our program, and the ALA for the Sara Jaffarian Award. I love that this award allows the junior ambassadors to continue to make a difference for our school with $5,000, and for others with this webinar, I think. So thank you. Now on the next page, I really do feel like we help make the world a better place. Here are some resources. A couple things about the resources. I have the book club archive. If you click around in there, they update that regularly. So sometimes it does change, but this will take you to the, where you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the different book clubs. And I also listed the UN Compact, a list of businesses. So the Hillenbrand is on that list. So you might take a look at that. It's a pretty substantial list, but you can filter it by where you live, and you might find some businesses right near you that could help you with that are part of the Global Compact that might be interested in partnering with you. At the beginning, I added 2 little videos that we used at the beginning. When we first started on that lesson plan, you can see we did 2 videos about what's the UN and what are sustainable development goals. Teachingbooks.net is just a nice little resource that has some places for teaching resources. And then book resources. If you're not familiar with firstbook.org, you don't have to be a school or anything. That's a great resource. They have open ebooks, a marketplace, and a book option. Now you have to qualify to use either by poverty or Title I, but it's worth looking into. And then another good source is Epic. It's a digital library. It's free to use at school. We used it a lot. It was free during COVID as well. But our students found like Maddie's Fridge and Stone Soup. They found some of the picture books on Epic. And then when they did their presentations, they were able to show show that book up on the screen nice and big, which was great. And then I just have a link to the Grain of Rice Project in case you're interested. So, so really that's it for me. Samantha, can I think I'll turn it over to you to see if there's any questions or.
Great, thanks, Anne. So we have about 20 minutes left for questions. Feel free to type those in the chat box or the Q&A, and we will read those off. In the meantime, we did have one question come through earlier in the presentation, and I see Chris answered it. Thank you, Chris. But just let it's in the recording. I'm actually going to ask it to you, Anne. What does RTI stand for?
Originally, it stood for Response to Intervention, and it was a way to help with remediation sorts of things. In more recent years, at least in our area, they've changed it to Response to Instruction, so that you respond to any kind of instruction that a student needs, whether it's remediation or enrichment or just time to practice. Does that help?
Great. Yeah, thank you. So while people are thinking of their questions and typing them in, I also have a general question for you. For anyone who is interested in starting a program like this now and may not be in the library, do you have any tips for how they might be able to start that program?
Oh, sure. Well, I think the first thing I would do is I would get onto the UN's website to take a look at the types of things that they offer, and then because they have books and they do have resources. For example, there's a whole book. There's a PDF of a book called Frida that shares things. There's videos. There's actually some of the authors from the book, so read them out loud. You can find the authors of like the Good Garden. She reads her story out loud. So I think I would go through I would look at the UN website first, is what I would do. And then I would think about what it is that you want what you want to happen. Do you just want to have a book club? And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, after this year, we'll probably have purchased enough books for all of those SDGs that we could actually just run a regular book club without all the extra pieces. But do you want to delve deeper? And I just think you need to decide what you want. What do you want to happen? What do you want those kids to do and learn, and then make some decisions going forward, I think.
Great. So I haven't seen anyone type any additional questions in. Since we have some time, is there anything else that you would like to mention that you didn't have a chance to cover in the main portion?
Definitely. Well, I cut some things. I can talk and talk and talk about this program, and I talk kind of fast, thinking, "Oh my gosh, I always talk too long." So, a couple things. The program was, the kids were just great. I don't know that I talked enough about the kids. They really, our program, we were successful immediately. They embraced it, and one of the things that I would say, like they made adults cry regularly, several times. They would ask them what they learned, and they would tell them about poverty or this or that, and they're like, oh, they just blew them away with some of their high interest and engagement, and knowing that they make a difference, which was really big. I love that about that. Let's see what else they could make adults cry. They had some other things. Oh, they were quoting our guest speakers verbatim. And then the interesting thing is that our other students were quoting our junior ambassadors from their lessons. There was one case during the Readathon. I was teaching a third grade class, and I just said something like, "Oh, in Haiti, they're going to do this. The 2/3 of the money goes here, and some of the money will come here, and some of the money will go there." And this little third grader, he raised his hand and said, "Excuse me," and he proceeded to tell me exactly what was going to happen, and was quoting the junior ambassador lesson. So the fact that it all trickled out to the whole school, I thought was just great. Um, I do I do see a question.
Yep. Yep. And I'll just read it out so that the recording has it. What were your greatest challenges in implementing this program?
I don't know. I didn't have any. I was so hyped and excited about this program from the get-go. Anybody that got near, I would talk about. The biggest challenges were probably just keeping track of the books. And I had spreadsheets for the books, but I didn't have any challenges. I think the COVID and going online, and if we had known we were going to be done, we would have handled it, and kids, we would have been able to do a little bit more, because they would have been coming regularly, kind of thing, to the class. So I think COVID was probably the biggest thing, and that turned out, it just put a damper on like some of the projects that we did. But other than that, I'm sorry, I don't have I didn't have many challenges. Our only discipline problem was that kids kept coming early. They would leave class early to get there and start working. So I'm that's not a very good answer, but there just weren't very many challenges.
Great. Another question is, what were the students most excited about? The presentations they gave or the guest speakers?
Um, I think, quite honestly, I think the thing in the end, I think they were so surprised. I don't know if they were so surprised, but I think they were just thrilled to know that you can make a difference even at their age. They saw that process of making a difference. I think they internalized that. I think they had just big conversations at home with their families about things. Um, I think what they liked about the presentations is they had so much control. They worked with a partner. When they learned to use the Google Slides and know that they could share, all of a sudden it didn't have to be during that half hour. They could work from home. They could work from two different floors. The fifth grade and the fourth grade were on different floors. They could ask somebody else to read their stuff and just make comments. And then when they were sharing their information, they had a real audience and a real purpose for creating their projects. Does that make sense? A lot of times with projects, it's assigned for a grade or assigned for just the teacher to take a look at. But they had real audiences. So I would say, and probably for each child, it would be different. Our guest speakers were wonderful. And we even had like the editor for the newspaper. She came. Some of our kids were interested in writing, and we were in the newspaper several times, and we just talked about that process a little bit. So I would say you'd have to ask each of the children, but I would say probably presentations. I'm sure they enjoyed guest speakers and different guest speakers for the different topics. But I think they were just most excited about learning that you can be 10 years old and you can be that one little grain of rice in that bowl that makes the difference, that changes things in the world.
Great. So we have a few minutes left for any additional questions that might come through. We will stay on for a couple of more minutes before closing out.
And again, I would like to thank you, Samantha, and BB, and Chris for your roles in helping us continue to make a difference and being able to put this out to the world. Again, it was a wonderful program. It was wonderful from the get-go, and it was one of those a joy day in and day out. And it wasn't hard to do. And when you give kids opportunities, they were to do things and learn about it. It was amazing. They really were amazing, and I appreciate this the program itself, and I appreciate everything you've done through the ALA. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So it looks like we haven't had any additional questions come through, so we're going to go ahead and close it out. So thank you to everyone for joining us today. The recording of today's presentation will be made available on programminglibrarian.org within about 24 hours. Thank you again to Anne and Chris and Bibi. Thank you.